Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing? Yeah? I know I stand between you all and the break, so I promise this won't be a very long session. I can see people are starting to think, but I just wanted to first and foremost just acknowledge Azim and just say what a truly inspiring and powerful story. I mean, genuinely, I don't know how I follow that, but thank you for being so open and honest and showing the other side of racism that people don't always see or know about. And it takes guts and courage to come up here and be open and be vulnerable. So thank you for sharing that with all of us. So I think I've got my slides over there. So I was really excited to come and talk today around advancing race equity, and I think this is probably the perfect time for us to be having this conversation. Um, I think loads of people that have come up on stage have talked about what's kind of going on in the world and what we're kind of seeing and the times that we're living through. But I think it's important that we are all here, and everybody that's here is here because they're here for a reason. They're here because they want to learn and they want to see what they can do to make things better. So, just a little bit about myself and the organisation. Obviously, I'm part of Diversifying Group, which is an organisation that I set up about 10 years ago, really to support organisations on their journey of becoming inclusive. And I remember when I started the organisation, it was at a time that nobody was even talking about DEI. It wasn't even trending, as people would kind of say. It wasn't fashionable. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to hear about it. And even when I talked about diversity and inclusion, I'd always get people saying, "Oh, is that about women? Is that trying to get more women onto jobs? Or is that about, people that are from different kind of communities?" People didn't really know what it meant. And it was really a difficult time to try and really take people on a journey. And the reason I call it a journey is because there's no end point. This is something that will continue. And even though we are a little bit of hurdles at the moment and stumbling blocks, this is something that impacts all of us. Every single one of us have some form of diversity, whether that's our upbringing, where we come from, where we went to school, our education, where we grew up. Intersectionality plays a big part in this conversation. So this impacts all of us. So the organization that I run is one that takes organizations on a journey and looking at how do we make sure that the workplaces that we all come to are ones that really allow us to be ourselves, where we can succeed, we can thrive, and they have the right kind of culture to allow us to flourish, and our differences are not held against us or they're not seen as barriers. And we've been lucky enough to work across a number of different services, whether that's executive search and recruitment. And we were lucky enough to partner with Newcastle Building Society in appointing their new chief operating officer. So we do support organisations on their talent, but also with education, because education is really important. So through training and changing hearts and minds about how people can engage with this topic, I think is really important as well. So what I kind of wanted to start with, there's a particular date that springs to mind. If I was to say the 25th of May, 2020, does anybody know why that date is important? We were in lockdown, yes, that's correct. But that specific date, the 25th of May, if you cast your minds back, the 25th of May, 2020, George Floyd. So that was a day where the world witnessed the murder of somebody in front of our eyes. It's probably one of the most triggering days of my life and a lot of people that I know, where all of us were going through this moment together. We were in our homes because of lockdown. We were all watching TV. And I always remember those words, "I can't breathe." Those words stuck with me for days. And I was in tears. I remember phoning my parents and just going, "I can't believe what I'm watching. I can't believe what I'm seeing. This can't be happening." My friends were phoning me. They were in tears. They were like, "What is going on? What's happening to this world?" But that moment was a catalyst of change. It was a moment that shook everybody to their core. And it was a moment that the world finally realized some of the inequalities that still exist for people of color, for people within our very, very communities, within our friendship groups, within our workplaces. And I remember literally the phone ringing off the hook in our offices. Like, we, it was during COVID, there wasn't much happening. And all of a sudden, we had calls from organizations ringing us up and going, we need anti-racist training. Black squares started appearing on organizations' kind of Instagram pages, social media. Companies were putting all these anti-racist kind of statements, and there was all this activity and flurry of, anti-racist kind of activities kind of going on during that period. And it was brilliant because finally change was happening. We were starting to see action being taken. This is action that for years and years and years we'd been talking about and we've been calling out for. I remember, I grew up under the Nelson Mandela kind of regime. My parents come from Southern Africa, and we grew up with Mandela fighting for change, and that's how I was brought up with wanting to do right in the world and standing up and speaking out. So this was something that wasn't new to us, but the world finally caught on and finally started to see what was going on in the world. And for a moment, we had hope. We had hope that things were finally changing, that people were starting to put in place and dismantling some of these barriers that existed in our society. Organizations started to put aside budgets to get this work done. There was training that was starting to get rolled out. This wasn't just being put on, people of color to do the work. Finally, they were hiring people to actually come in and drive some of these initiatives and drive some of this change. And we felt we were finally getting somewhere as a society, and we were moving forward. And we were going to see that change that we had longed for so long. And it took the death of somebody for that change to happen. And I think if I think of the start of last year, we started to see a dip in some of these activities. Budgets started getting slashed. Obviously, the economy had a big part to play in that. We started hearing people talk about diversity fatigue. Oh, we've already done training. We kind of ticked that box. We need to move on now. This diversity thing, we've done it. We've been there. And more, that conversation started to get louder and louder and louder. And it became very difficult for a lot of people that had been working within our sector trying to drive change through D&I initiatives. And then the summer happened. I think Jenny alluded to the riots in the summer. People had thought, well, this has gone away. We fixed racism. It doesn't exist anymore. We've all done the training. We've all, done all the workshops that we needed to. And it reared its ugly head again. And all of a sudden, guess what happened? The phone started ringing. Organizations wanted more training, more anti-racist kind of support. But it shouldn't take, moments like the summer riots, like the murder of George Floyd, for action to happen. This should be something that we're constantly doing all the time. This is something that should just become, within our DNA of organizations, something that we're doing constantly to drive change forward. If I think of where we are now, I dread turning on the news, especially the political news coming from the other side of the pond, because you just don't know what you're waking up to. It seems like every day somebody's got something against DEI. And I always kind of say, DEI is not a trend. It's basically fundamental necessity for justice and equity, and especially when we're talking about the workplace. And I think it's become something that people are quite fearful of. People don't really want to speak up. They don't know whether they should talk about it. They don't know what they should be saying or doing. And it's a little bit confusing. And we're seeing organizations just not sure. Should we still be carrying on with the work? Should we not be doing the work? Where do we stand on this? But I always kind of say, even within that resistance, we still need to strive forward, because definitely this impacts all our lives. This isn't something that's just for people of color. This is something that impacts your colleagues, your friends, people that you're surrounded by every single day. So this work is important. And I think we all have a part to be playing to make sure that we don't drop the ball, that we continue doing the work, because the work is important and it matters. So when I look at some of the differences that we've kind of had, especially in the workplace, I kind of think of what organizations should be doing, especially, in the face of adversity. What are the key things that organizations need to focus on and do despite all the noise that's going on? And I think there's legislation that's coming in. We now have a new government, and the Labour government has really put equality at the heart of their manifesto, of who they are as a party. And there will be mandatory reporting that all organizations have to do. So that's actually still holding organizations to account. So whatever's happening across the pond, here in the UK, the work still carries on, and we have to do this. And I'm thrilled to actually have a government that's still placing this at the heart of this work still needs to carry on, and we are holding organisations to account to start reporting on their ethnicity pay gap, to start reporting on their disability pay gap. And I think when you have leaders who are still driving and pushing that change, that's when these differences we start to see the impact of that. And I suppose one of the things I kind of wanted to also look at is when we look at D&I, this shouldn't just be a tick box exercise. It's looking at it as the lens in which we look at everything. Everything that we do has to have that inclusive lens. Are we putting in the right kind of processes that allow people from different kind of backgrounds to come through? How are we making sure that we're supporting underrepresented groups within our organizations? A lot of the times when I walk into rooms and I walk into organizations, I'm normally one of the very few people of color. A lot of the times I'm probably the only person of color in a lot of rooms that I walk in. And this is in 2025. It's not that society isn't diverse. And I think, a lot of the things that we hear say, yeah, but there isn't that diversity everywhere. It is everywhere. You just have to look outside. There is that representation. A lot of the times it's not reflected when we walk into organizations. So there's still a lot more work that we need to be doing around creating access. It's not about, when we talk about diversity, it's not lowering the bar. It's about how do we widen the gate so more people come through. I think as I alluded to, not everybody has equal access to those opportunities. How do we create that opportunity? It's not tokenistic. It's not giving somebody special preference. Nobody wants to be hired as a diversity hire. I want to be hired because I'm the best person for that job, but I've had equal access to go for that opportunity, and I've been given the opportunity to give my best shot. And it's also understanding what good looks like. I think sometimes when we are looking and measuring what good looks like, we're measuring it in the usual kind of lens, but we show up in very different kind of ways, and people represent the best form in very different kind of ways. So it's sometimes looking at things not in the lens that we've always done it with, but looking at how do we make sure that we're supporting people. It could be through making sure that your processes allow for people with neurodiversity to be able to kind of speak up and say, actually, I might need accessibility support or requirements to do this interview, making sure that those things are available so people can give the best shot. I think we touched on data, and I think Jenny showed, some of the data which was from the summer last year. And I always kind of think people can't argue with data. When you look at data, you're able to really put a clear roadmap of how you move forward. Without data, a lot of the times you're just, stabbing in the dark. So I think it's really important to track that data, use it in terms of how you put processes to move forward. What is that data telling you? If you're measuring things like your gender pay gap, where are those disparities? What does that look like across different kind of communities? Your hiring and retentions, how many people are leaving? Why are they leaving? Exit interviews give you so much information. A lot of companies will have exit interviews, but they do nothing with that data. And therefore, their processes never change. And they still have this leaky bucket where people come in, they do all the hard work of hiring people, they get them into the organization, and they just can't keep them. So this is not just about, let's just hire people that are different. This is about how do we hire from the widest range of society, but how do we create an environment that is really inclusive, a culture that they feel they can come in, that can be a part of, and they stay. And how do we progress people? Because it's not just about getting people in, it's about keeping them, but also progressing them. Because without progression, you lose people and they go elsewhere and they'll find other opportunities. So that data is really, really important in that side. I'm just mindful I've got a few minutes left and I've got a few more slides, so I will buzz that through. We talked about recruitment. So this is something that we do day in, day out as an organization. And one of the things we keep getting asked a lot of from organizations is we need more diversity. We need more women, in leadership roles. We need more people of color. And that's great. But I always ask them, well, what's the challenges that you've had in hiring them? And a lot of the times I get the same answer, which is, well, we've gone out to market, we just can't find them. Well, how have you gone out to market? What is it that you're saying about yourselves that's going to make somebody want to come and work for you? If I don't see somebody that looks like me in an organization, I self-disqualify because I think that's not place for me. And that is true of a lot of people. If you go, whether you look at an organization on the website and you see they're all men, as a woman, would I want to apply to that place? I probably think, no, it's not a place for me. I'm not going to fit in. And therefore, I don't even bother. Even though I'm probably the best person or really qualified for that job, I'll self-disqualify. So your hiring processes are really, really important. If you are trying to build an inclusive culture, what do you look like to the outside world? How inviting are you as an organization to invite people into your world? Because without that, nobody will want to come. And nothing changes. And again, I've seen Jenny demonstrating around the different kind of groups that they've got, employee resource kind of networks. They're useful tools. They're only useful tools if you give them the voice and you listen. A lot of the times we have organizations, it's almost sometimes like the collecting badges of these ERG groups. And I'm like, okay, so what's the impact that your groups have had? How have they changed a lot of your policy? How have they shaped this and that? Oh, well, we've done this, we've done but without that clear data and giving them the access to really help, formalize your processes and change your processes, it just becomes like clubs, really. Clubs of people that are different and not really impacting anything at all. So you've got to give them a voice. And I was so pleased to hear how that's linked when you have leaders like Andrew who sit as sponsors of some of these key groups, because they can hear firsthand what's happening and what's coming through from those groups, and they're able to directly change and drive meaningful change within the organization because they're witnessing and hearing it firsthand. So whatever groups you have within your organizations, you do need to have those executive sponsors as part of that, because without that, it just becomes clubs and groups that people are just hanging out at all the times. And again, just to wind it up because I've run out of time, it's just to kind of stay focused amid these challenges. I think we've heard from a lot of the speakers today that it is a difficult time and there's a lot of noise. Genuinely, there's a lot of noise and it's only going to get louder. We're in, 2-3 weeks in of the US new leader. I won't mention by name, but, and already, everyone's fearful. People just don't know what's happening. And there's a lot of people that are almost kind of taking what's happening over there and trying to bring it here. So we've got to stand strong. We've got to stay true to our beliefs, which is we want a society that represents all of us. One of the things I'm so proud to be British and to live in a country like this is, walking outside, the magic that is there when you see people from different walks of life, different kind of backgrounds. My friends represent the widest form of society, and I'm so proud of that. And only in a country like this where we can still have friends that, are from different backgrounds and we get on, we have a laugh, we enjoy each other, we learn from each other. That is a beautiful thing, and we should never lose sight of that. That's something we should hold dear. But there will be forces that are trying to tear that apart. They're trying to tear that apart from a societal base, and sometimes that infiltrates within the organizations. One of the stark things about the summer riots is there were people that were out on the streets. These are the same people that sometimes you sat next to, but they're the ones that were actually out there. And that's quite scary. I had a friend of mine that phoned me up and said, my colleague got arrested in the summer riots. And she sat next to this guy for 3.5 years. And yet he was out on the streets, marching, throwing petrol bombs or whatever it was he was doing, and he got arrested. She's like, I didn't even know those are the views that he held. So it's really, really scary that sometimes, unless we are challenging some of these ideals and we're creating safe spaces where people can talk and can bring some of the experiences and we can learn from each other, nothing will ever change. Race is a really difficult subject to talk about. it can be uncomfortable. People just don't know what to say. And a lot of times people don't want to say the wrong thing, they don't want to offend, and therefore they say nothing. But it's the fear that's holding us back. It's the fear that's holding us from moving forward. And I always say it's okay to get it wrong, but learn from it. If you learn from it, you won't do it again. But if you don't even ask and you don't even try, you'll always be fearful and therefore you never grow. There's a lot of slides here, but I'm going to finish it off because I'm definitely way over time. But I just kind of wanted to leave you something which is, and I think Azim, you touched on this, which is, you know, action and accountability. And I always say the word inclusion begins with I. We have to be the ones to drive that change. This can't be on somebody else. This can't be a D&I problem. This can't be a HR problem. This is an I problem. Be the change that you want to see in this world, because nobody's going to drive that change unless we're prepared to be the ones that are driving that change. Call out things. If you hear things, if you hear somebody saying something, speak up. Call it out. It doesn't always have to be, don't be an active bystander that does nothing if you hear something's not right. Speak up. Sometimes people are, they're fearful, they can't say anything, therefore they go quiet. If you're in a position where you can speak and say, I'm sorry, but that's not right. Call it out. This is the part that all of us play. If we want to see a world that is inclusive, allows all of us to really succeed in this, then we've got to be part of that as well. We've got to be part of that solution. And I kind of just wanted to leave you with this quote, and it's one by Martin Luther King. And I think it's really, really important, especially in the times that we're in. I'm not going to read, I'll just let you all read it and just take a moment to take that in. So, let's be the change that we want to see. And I just want to say thank you for listening. I know this is a really, really tough topic to be part of and to listen to, and there are some things that are quite uncomfortable, but we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that's the only way change happens. Thank you.